Welcome to the Filmmaker's Playbook. My name is Jason Branagan and this is a podcast all about filmmaking. My guest today is actor and writer Stephen Jones. Stephen's television series Northern Lights, in which he plays the lead, Lloyd, has just been nominated for 4 IFTAs, including Best Drama and Best Script for Stephen himself. Some of Stephen's other credits include Love Hate, Kin, Nowhere Fast and Red Rock, as well as his critically acclaimed plays From Eden and Northern Lights. On today's show, we talk about Stephen starting acting in the Drama Society in UCD, how he writes and letting ideas simmer for a long period of time, developing his play Northern Lights into a TV series, focusing on the job at hand instead of worrying about the next one, and much more. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Thank you for listening. Stephen Jones, thanks very much for joining me. I am very much looking forward to talking to you.
Well, thanks a million for having me on, Jason, and looking forward to the chat as well.
So, look, I guess first and foremost, I'd love to know how you kind of got started in the industry, and as an actor and a writer, was it one of those professions that drew you in initially, or did you always want to do both?
I'll start at the end of that kind of question. It was writing that was the first thing for me. I always think you can go way back into someone's like childhood, not to get too like I'm sitting on the couch paying you 75 quid an hour. But yeah, I was always kind of big imagination, living in my imagination as a kid, writing scenarios for like my toy wrestlers and developing storylines that went against what I was watching on telly, or writing out football leagues and doing fixtures and having storylines. And so that was always something I was doing and writing it down physically, you know, even as a kid. And then when I was a teenager, I ended up going into a creative writing group based out of Tala Library, where I'm from, and got some real good encouragement there. Like we even published a collection of short stories and poems, and then we had a theatre company come in to the Civic in Tala and for the launch and sort of do snippets of it and excerpts and act them out. One of the actors of that company was a writer as well, and now she's like a best-selling crime author called Tana French, who sold like millions of books around the world. At the time, she was just a jobbing actor too. So the mentor of that group was a guy called Larry O'Loughlin. He was an author primarily for teenagers and children. And when he discovered that I was planning to go to UCD to study English and history, which I did, he said, you should join the Drama Society in UCD. And I said, oh, well, I don't really act. No, I sort of had a kind of an interest, but I never went to any drama classes because I was too busy playing football. So at the weekend when you're a kid, you kind of have to make a choice, and mine was to play football. But I used to mess around and make kind of silly comedies with my mates. We took one of our mates, his dad had an old video camera. We took that and we used to do our own version of Jackass. And then I wrote like comedy scripts, and they'd be kind of ripping off all the stuff of kind of pop culture, South Park or whatever was going on in the 90s. And so I did have an interest in it. But long story short, joined the Drama Society because this guy Larry's point was, you might write a play one day. My daughter was in the Drama Society at UCD. They put her plays on. So that's what I did. But once I was in UCD, I ended up seeing an audition for a play in the Drama Society, and it was 12 Angry Men. And I loved that movie. So I ended up doing an audition and got the kind of lead role, the Henry Fonda role of the guy who says not guilty at the start. And then of the 12 guys that were in that play, I think 4 of us are professional actors now. And this is my first ever play. There was 2 of the guys from the comedy group, Foil Arms and Hog. There's one lad that's a director. There's one lad that was an actor. He was on Fair City for years, but now he decided to do something else as a career. So that was just the start of my couple of years in UCD. I was there for 4 years in total, where I was writing plays, acting in plays nonstop. And even though my degree says, kind of arts degree in English and history and a master's in creative writing, it really should be UCD DramSoc, because that's where I spent most of my time. But a lot of things happened. As I said, I wrote plays I had an English lecturer who loved to come down to see the plays that we did. Told my parents in my second year of college I should forget about academics and concentrate on being an actor when I finished. Had a Druid debut that I when you're young and innocent, you just send these plays to the top companies in the world. And Druid got back to me and did a rehearsed reading at the Galway Arts Festival of one of my plays when I was 21. So there was all these things happening. I wrote a play that Peter Coonan, most people would know Peter, a really good actor. He was the lead role in my play in UCD. And then the director, Mark O'Connor, came to see that because he was coming to see Peter, who was a friend of a friend. Got chatting to Mark afterwards. He was like, yeah, I have this idea for a script. We ended up a few months later going out and filming a few days for free as a kind of a teaser to show the film board. The film board gave the film 100 grand to be made. That was Between the Canals, which got made. And off the back of that, we got invited down to the actor studio in the Factory, which is now Bow Street acting school. That's how we got parts in Love Hate. That's how I got my agent. And so it just, I look back on it now and that's like, God, for 14 or 15 years ago, maybe. And it's just been like that. It's just one thing has led to another, and learning about the business and trying to get better opportunities by writing my own work when I wasn't getting work as an actor, just through the normal channels. So that's the long-winded version of sort of how I got started in it and why I'm still doing it, I guess.
Well, it sounds like you were in great company in UCD.
The generations before me, like all the way back to Conor McPherson and Chris O'Dowd, Rory Nolan, they were all, well before my time. And then my generation, I said Peter Coonan, Gavin Dre, Ian Toner, Katrina Ennis, Killian Scott, Ronan Raftery. I can go on and on. The boys from Firearms and Hog, all three of them. Directors, producers, like it was one of those places where we all got so into it. And it was the people who were kind of a year or two ahead of you who were preparing to audition for drama schools. And you were sort of saying to them, well, hang on, you can do this as a job. Which seems like such a silly question, but everyone asked it because, being a professional actor, you still thought in those days was for the handful of people you saw in big movies. It wasn't something I thought about where, I could do plays in Dublin and pay bills, So actually I did attempt to get into drama school. I flew several times to London and got to the final round of some of the big schools, but didn't get in. But when I think of it now, there was no way like my family or I could have afforded to go for 3 years there. But Between the Canals came along and, that opened a lot of doors. Actually, for a lot of people in the movie ended up, kind of doing Love, Hate and different things. And obviously you see the success of Barry Keoghan. He was like answered an ad in a shop and had a handful of lines in the film as a teenager.
It seems like, as you describe it, very cause and effect, each thing leading to the next. And in one sense, you make it sound somewhat seamless, and I'm sure it wasn't, as careers in the arts generally aren't. They're usually very hard. So was there a moment kind of going from like UCD, Drama Society, you're finishing out in UCD and you're looking for professional work as a writer and an actor? What was the in-between, or what did that look like for you?
No, I wasn't really, I kind of concentrated on acting for the early part of it. I was working in a call center part-time, a job that I'd had through college for a bookmaker, which was good for me because I'm a big sport fan. So it meant even though I was working on weekends and stuff, at least I was watching sport on the screens in the job. And it was a good atmosphere. There was a lot of kind of students and people like me, and it was actually a handy job for an actor because it was quite flexible. If you had no acting work, you could take shifts off people and work as much as you wanted, but you were only contracted to work 8 hours a week or something. So I was doing that, and I was doing a lot of kind of profit share plays. There wasn't much profit, but the thing was, at the time, like, I thought this was the biggest thing, which is, I've often been asked for advice from younger people starting out like in acting. And I remember thinking, I never thought of what the next job will be. And I saw a lot of actors do that. They weren't concentrating on the job they were doing. They were worried about, will this person be in to see it? Will that person be in to see it? Will I get an agent? When will I get an audition for the Abbey or something? Whereas I was like, this tiny play in this tiny theater is the be all and end all. I think that was a good attitude to have, because it meant I just tried to be the best I could be in that particular thing, and hope that somebody would notice, or that I'd get better, and that hard work in that sense would pay off. And then as that progressed, and I got an agent, and I got a few more kind of bigger jobs, I was able to quit that job in 2013, because I was doing 2 plays, doing a tour with Druid and a tour of Alone It Stands, very funny rugby play. And and that was a real moment for me where I said, okay, I've handed in my notice to this job. Unless I am absolutely like the most destitute person, I'll do my everything to not have another job. And it's not because having another job as an actor is a bad thing, but I just felt that it would give me good motivation to kind of up the my output and get back to writing, and to get back to creating opportunities. So if someone rang and there was a theatre job that they were going to pay me for, great. But at the same time, if I had a couple of months free, I was building relationships with different theatre venues. I was saying, I have this show for you. I was working on like getting set guarantees. I was doing like getting my voiceover profile together. I was getting different things like that in place, so that there'd always be a chance there'd be some work on the go, But I think being a writer, and at a certain point starting to write my own stuff, gave me a big advantage. It just meant on those quieter times, there was no excuse not to ring a venue and say, have you a couple of weeks that I can throw a show up.
That's great. And it's a great moment in, I think, any career to get to, when you can quit the day job, as scary as it is. When you graduated and you're kind of predominantly pursuing acting, did the writing kind of fall to the side a little bit there, and you kind of focused your energies predominantly into the acting work and then kind of came back to writing? Or were you still writing your own material continuously?
I think I wasn't as sure about the writing at that period of time. I think it was because you're kind of fearless when you're in college, and I was in a bubble, where I thought all the work was great, and I could just throw it up and not be afraid. And I think I had a couple of years where I was going, I don't think I've written that, and that's kind of good enough for, I didn't put enough really time into it. I was quite busy acting. And I look back on it now, and I think actually maybe it wasn't that. Maybe it was just, timing. It was that I needed a couple of years to work on a few scripts as an actor, just to learn. And then be given that push, that the leap between writing a play and throwing it up in university and throwing it on in a venue in Ireland, like the leap shouldn't be that big. You should just go for it and see what happens. But I think by the time, I think it was 2015, 2016 came around, an old housemate and friend of mine and director of a lot of my work, the late Carl Shields, he kind of said, here's a date, theatre upstairs. The idea that we spoke about loads of times, write a thing, because it's going on whether you like it or not. And it was kind of an extra push. And I went, okay. So the timing was kind of right. And once that was kind of a success, I think I felt, okay, there's something here. So it's only in the last few years, and obviously then like writing Northern Lights and then getting the adaptation to a television show, that it's kind of, that writing has brought itself up to a kind of a 50-50 level with acting. So I don't know. Yeah, I think for years and years I probably would have said I'm an actor. I started as a writer, and then I kind of became, for many years, I was an actor who writes the odd time, and now I would say I'm an actor writer. I think it's kind of evened itself up a little bit.
So Northern Lights was originally staged in Theatre Upstairs as well, right?
Yeah.
How did that play come to be initially?
Well, that's a good example of timing, and that some things do take time. Like that was inspired by a real life incident of me. I moved to Ormond Quay when I was 26, so it's 12 years ago. And my first week, that was my first place ever to live out of home. And saw the aftermath of a guy going into the Liffey. Really strange, and just very striking memory. And I remember anyone I saw at Grattan Bridge, the kind of green bridge near Capel Street, anyone I saw there, I always thought if they were standing there for too long, like, oh God, I always just had that image. And then I had the image of a woman standing there, and who was she in relation to maybe the guy who went in? And I don't know, it was something we toyed around with as being a kind of a short when I was in the actor studio, and it never really came to fruition, but I always had the idea. And years later, something else happened, which kind of, in a strange way, connected the story of the guy watching this and the girl at the bridge. And and that it was a two-hander, very small scale play set in one room over a weekend. And but when I think about it, it was, that the play was like 6 or 7 years of every now and again coming back to an image or an idea of these two people connected through one incident.
Before going back to Northern Lights, do you find that a lot of your work kind of maybe begins a long time ago, or that things take a long time to materialize? It's not so much, oh, I have this idea, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write this over the next 6 weeks. Like, these seeds of things exist for years.
In general, for me, yes. More often than not. Like, I had a play that was on a few years ago in the Glassmass Theatre on Dawson Street, and called Summer Hill, and I really, really liked it. It was got a great response. But I think of it, and I remember saying to the cast, like, the first scene of this play I wrote in 2007, a version of it. But it just wasn't ready then. The story wasn't full. It wasn't the right story. But the mother and the son, they've had this conversation in my mind for whatever it was, 13 years. So yeah, I think I retain a lot of things, and I think it's a good thing. Sometimes it means that I can be slower to produce new work, but I don't like to put anything out unless I feel the idea is in its right form, like, my partner is a dentist, so very much in the muggle world. She'd be going, what you do all day? And I was going, well, I kind of just, I float around, and I read a little bit, and I kind of, just sat around some more. And she's like, what? I'm like, but in a way, I know it's a cliche and it's kind of a joke, but I'm like, in a way, I am working. Like, my brain is on nonstop about different ideas, and so and cooking them up and fighting back and forth in my head. Sometimes that can be hard to turn off. Yeah, I'm much better at letting something simmer over a long period of time than just starting with a blank page with not really sure where I'm going and writing something.
I think there can sometimes be a mythology around ideas of how quickly people write, because that part of the process, all that gestation, is often left out of the discussion, where it's been living in someone's head for such a long period of time,
Yeah, like at the moment, for example, a friend of mine is doing this kind of little short play, or more like monologue series, and asked me to write something for him. And it's one person on a stage having a conversation with the audience, and it'd be 15 or 20 minutes. And like, I'm struggling so hard with it because, it was just kind of asked of me to do in a relatively short period of time. And yeah, I could churn something out, but it's almost like my body refuses to write something if I haven't got it somewhat fleshed out in my head. Now, that doesn't mean there can't be changes. I find change and inspiration, when I'm writing all the time, especially within dialogue. Something might just come out and it might change the course of a scene or whatever. But with something like that, I almost feel like, I don't even want to touch the computer until I have it worked out, until I've gone for a walk and my brain has kind of tracked it.
So with Northern Lights, Am I right in thinking you were due to go to the Abbey, but COVID hit?
Yeah, we were going to the Peacock in the Abbey with two of my plays from Eden and Northern Lights, and both had the same two actors and the same director. So they were kind of like, without being connected story wise, they were very much in the same world, kind of companion pieces. So we were going to do kind of on off both of those plays for 2 weeks, and then COVID hit, which in a way, it's like anything. It's probably a good thing, because the next thing I got a phone call to say that Deadpan Pictures wanted to potentially do something with Northern Lights, and that was the start of that process, which was over a good few years, and it's led us to kind of today.
What was your initial reaction to the idea of adapting Northern Lights when Deadpan called?
Well, I was kind of a bit skeptical. So RTE were involved initially. So there was the head of drama and the head of comedy, and they both subsequently left RTE. So I met them with Ailish McElmeal, who's kind of one of the producers at Deadpan, and I had worked for Deadpan as an actor on their show Nowhere Fast, and so got on very well with Ailish, and she kind of said, "I must get you writing something." Some development at some point. This was kind of an ongoing. Anytime we saw each other, that would be part of it. You write anything and la la la, and yeah, she saw Northern Lights and sent all her team in to see it afterwards. We all sat down, and yeah, I was sort of like, I couldn't really see initially how he would make a series out of these two people in one room. And I was like, yeah, obviously I'll have a think about it. And they say, look, we'll try and get you a few quid to go away and write a couple of pages. And you go, oh yeah, I can definitely do that. So, and yeah, no, but that conversation, did its job. It sparked, it got me thinking. Okay, if it had to be done, how would I do it?
Was there any fear in the idea of adaptation? And I guess in that kind of film and TV world, when you sign over the work to someone else, it's no longer your own. Maybe your ownership isn't quite the same as in theater. So was there any fear that, does it become something that it isn't, or that I don't want it to be?
Only a little bit later on. I think, like, the thing that was interesting in this case is, like, it's so funny. I tell people, because I do get asked about it, and I go, it's kind of worked in reverse. It's like, I didn't have to knock on anyone's door. I didn't have to flog the idea. It was the other way around. Like, my door got knocked on, and I was being given the hard sell about how and why this could work. And I was being told that, we want you to write the thing, and you can act in it. And it was sort of like, all right, what's the catch? But there was no catch, except, obviously it had to be good, and the ideas had to be strong. So I went away and I thought about it, and I honestly wasn't even thinking down the line of it being made at all. I just went as an exercise to justify the couple of £100 they gave me, for a couple of pages of what this potentially could be. How would you open this world out? And then we went. It ended up being the first idea I had was what we kept all the way through, which was, I would keep the structure of the play. Two people, they meet on a Friday and they kind of spend this weekend together, and it's a bit kind of magic and a bit mad. And there's a phrase in one of those kind of writing books which I was given recently, which I had never read before, but it was sort of like it has to be odd but real. And that's what I thought about this weekend. It was an odd event, but if anyone who lives in Dublin knows that this could totally happen. And that was it. Yeah. So we'd have a present day, and then we flash back to different parts of these people's lives, which had sort of brought them to where they are now. And within the non-linear flashbacks, we'd find a kind of a mystery and an intrigue that would keep us, an audience, interested, even though it was always, my point from day one was, it shouldn't change the heart of what it is. It's a character drama about loss and grief and love and life. And so yeah, so that kind of idea developed, and so that the kind of phrase that the people at Lionsgate have been using for it is that it becomes more of an emotional detective story, that there is kind of mystery and little mini cliffhangers and twists, but it's not done in a way that makes it too plotty. It's still about, in my mind, people in a room talking.
That's great. I love that emotional detective story. And you kind of just touched on, I guess, that kind of principle of living in the work that you're doing and not thinking about what's next, even as you spoke about it in terms of acting, but in terms of actually developing that just focus on the pages that were in front of you, which I think is a really holistic way of approaching the industry, because you can drive yourself mad chasing the next.
Yeah. Well, I remember, and it's, I remember having a meeting years and years and years ago with a big theater who were kind of doing the thing. They'd have a coffee with kind of young writers and see what they could do. And they went, what ideas have you got? And it was like, I think I mentioned one or two. And the person went, do you know what we're looking for? We're looking for kind of a play about this. And I remember thinking, I could probably write that play or a version of it, but that's not what I'm interested in writing. And so again, my body almost wouldn't allow me, or I could write it, but it probably wouldn't be very good. And the same with Northern Lights. I think, look, don't get me wrong, if they're going to pay you tons of money, you have a decision to make. But at the same time, I was more interested in writing the story I wanted to write, which kind of touches on your point earlier about I didn't really have a fear, because the producers were very much on the same page as me in terms of what the story meant to them and why they connected with it and why they wanted to, have an adaptation of the play. And I got to the stage where I wrote the pilot, and like when they got behind that, it was very clear that they were in sync with what I thought it should be in terms of the feeling of it anyway. And of course there was times where I got help, and just structurally, because it was my first time writing television. But the pilot's not that different than episode 1 of the series that you see on screen. It's not drastically different from the very first draft of the pilot that I wrote, and certainly the heart of it remains the same. So that was important to me. It was like, what's the story you want to tell? If they wanted to tell Northern Lights in a very, very different way, maybe it would work. But I would just think, why would you adapt that play and that story, if it wasn't going to be what it was.
So what was the development process actually like then, having not written TV before as well?
It was, the usual, a 2-pager, a 5-pager, a 10-pager, all different stages of a process. Then it was, these kept getting green lit. Okay, go and write the full treatment of the series. Go and write the pilot. And that's when other producers and other people became interested. And the thing about it is that we did a lot of work kind of structurally later on. Once I had a kind of a story consultant, script editor and stuff come in to help, we all sat in a room and bashed out some of the ideas and went, where do we need to, remove certain things? There was maybe one or two extra storylines, arcs and threads that we didn't need. Some needed to be more focused in and less complicated and less plotty. But the thing was, I think they said, go away and write the pilot and don't worry about it. You just write what you write and we'll worry about it later. And so I think what was nice was there was an element of me structurally and not really knowing what I was doing, in the sense of I wasn't writing it in this, you could talk with some television people who are experts at going, you open like this, you do this, exciting incident, ad break, and they're sort of timing it because they've written television for years and years and years and years. I just kind of wrote the thing and, we'll worry about it later on. So that was how it kind of went. I was lucky in that I was given the freedom to just go and write, and then later on people could come in and tidy up, but also work around the fact that we were dealing with something that was its own pace. If scenes were longer for dialogue and more dialogue than you would expect in telly, in scenes, so be it, as long as it was good. Some rearrangement of flashbacks to create a bit of suspense, maybe, different things like that. But so I don't know. I just got lucky in that I was left to my own devices, and they kind of hoped that whatever I came up with naturally would be an easy fix in places that you sort of have to stick by certain rules.
When it came to developing that out yourself then, and you're kind of trying to figure out what this looks like over the course of 6 eps, how did you kind of manage the writing yourself, in terms of, one of the things that struck me as well as like the different story strands and the non-linear narrative. And I was curious as to whether you, like, did you kind of look at each of those stories in a linear manner and then like cut them up and kind of place them where they would go? Or are you kind of just jumping into, I suppose you had 2 pagers, 5 pagers, 10 page treatment, so you had a map, but when you were initially kind of maybe greenlit to go write the pilot, what was your process for like managing the information?
To be honest, I just went for it. It was like whatever was happening in the present day, at some point sparked something that would like kind of remind the characters of an event in the past. And that was all it was. It was just this kind of emotional trigger. And then later on, when we went back over the scripts, it was sort of, you could get a little bit more, hopefully, sophisticated, in that it didn't always have to be an exact, like he or she is thinking about this in that moment. It could just be the feeling or the scenario. For example, in episode 3, there's a whole kind of a weekend away at a karaoke competition, and it's the kind of the origin story of my character and his girlfriend's, relationship beginning. So in that one, it was almost a sense of that whole past scenario is playing out as one thing. It's not always that he's remembering it on each individual flashback. It's that it's just playing out throughout that day. Something about this day and that day are connected. And other times it was a very specific, somebody says a word and the other person remembers that they heard that they've been called this before, whatever it was. So it was just kind of, because I think if I sat down with something like that and tried to like put every little strand on a wall, in a way, I'd feel it would be almost too clean. I'd rather just see what happens, and then you can go, actually that works quite well, that one doesn't work so well, so can we just change the jigsaw puzzle around a little bit and see what happens? So it was more like lash it all down on paper and see what works. And then it's only like whatever's jarringly not working, that's what we can fix. But everything else doesn't have to be an exact rule. It just has to feel like, it's almost that thing of you'll notice it watching the episode if it jars, if it doesn't work, if the flashback has no bearing on what you've just seen or what you're about to see afterwards. There are these kind of little invisible moments, like a good football referee shouldn't be noticed, like the reasons for going back, you're aware of them, but it's not ever, oh, that feels wrong. Like, for example, I'm working on episodes for the second season at the moment, and there was one scene I just thought it was a really funny scene. It was great. But how I got into that scene from the present day, it was a flashback, and how I got out of it, it was so obvious that actually what was more important was that funny scene than its relation to what was happening in the present. I was forcing away. I was trying to jam in this kind of, what would you say, this transition, or a way to kind of, divert into this flashback. And that's when you go, no, this is not working. This is not real. This is just a writer trying to get a funny scene in.
So did you have to kill your darlings with that one?
Yeah, there was a few. There was some really stuff. There was really good stuff that I thought was, that were good scenes. But I've never been overly precious about it. And especially after making the first series, there were so many things which I thought were just so essential to the script. There might have been song choices or different things, and budget wise or rights issues and different things that couldn't be resolved, and you end up with a second choice or a third choice, or in some instances a fourth choice, and it ends up being kind of better, or better than you expected. Like, there's so many examples of that in Northern Lights, between certain karaoke songs, or there's a kind of a piece of, it was originally meant to be like a Bukowski poem, and it ends up being this kind of Bill Hicks thing. But in the context that he does it, it ends up being so kind of more beautiful and more connected to the overall theme of the show, about living your life and not being afraid. So just things that I thought were disasters ended up being much better for the show. And so I sort of feel like, your funny line, or your funny scene, or your funny scenario, if it's not right for the overall, then get rid of it. So I don't really have too many issues with that. It's usually the most random, stupidest line that like only a handful of people in the world would really get, that I'm most devastated about losing.
So was there any of them in season 1?
Just stupid little references. Like, even I remember fighting for a reference over somebody's name, because the guy was called Howard, and someone made the joke going, Howard, who gives you extra? Like, and even everyone was like, what's this in reference to? And I was like, well, the Halifax ads. And they were like, really? Can we not just get rid of this? And I was like, Howard. No, all right, go on, fine. Like the stupidest thing, So no issue with scrapping certain things. But yeah, so a good combination of, I think, very clever producers, not trying to make me something I'm not, or that certainly I wasn't at the time, because they could have hired somebody with 50 television series credits to write the thing. I think they wanted to take what they liked about the play and my style as a writer and use that, and then bring in a few people to help me shape it in places where it was a little bit rough.
So your style as a writer, do you think consciously about the audience? Because in Northern Lights, I think there's just this masterful kind of sense of like hierarchy of information and knowledge. Who knows what, when, including the audience, that I think turns it into that term you used, emotional detective story, where loads of dramatic tension, dramatic irony. There's so many kind of plans that we're waiting to pay off. It's, as I said, masterful. I think it's brilliantly written. I was wondering, are you designing things that way consciously, or did that happen naturally, or was it something that came or was added when you kind of begin that process of rewriting?
Like, the horrible answer is all of the above, I'm trying to be more specific though. I think there is a combination of factors. I think there's when you write something, it's like when you act, right? There's a couple of things going on at the same time. When I act on stage, I am genuinely living that particular scenario or moment as a character, which allows me to cry every night on stage if that's what the character is feeling. It allows me to, whatever the emotion is, even the extreme ends of emotion. It means that if it's a traumatic issue that the character is dealing with, it means that I'm probably not very nice to be around for a couple of weeks either side of the play. It's something I only really discovered a few years ago with a certain show I was doing, and it was pointed out to me. But at the same time, I am aware of that I'm in control of the audience in terms of my timing, where they laugh, where they go silent, the pace of the show, what I'm doing, the movement. So simultaneously, I'm living it for real. My body is really going through whatever the character is going through, in a sense, a version of it anyway. And at the same time, I am manipulating the audience into coming on this journey with me. And writing is sort of like that. There's a part of me that is going with it and feeling the flow, but then there's also a part going, well, we can't reveal that here because we want the audience to think this. So you want to get into that kind of happy blend of natural storytelling that feels real, but also there's a kind of a puppet master feel behind it that's structurally sophisticated enough to know where it goes. I mean, it's much more obvious in like I'm watching a show at the moment on Apple, Hijack, because I'm just in the mood of watching something where I just sit back and let Idris Elba and Neil Maskell and the boys and girls just do their fucking thing, and it's great. And it's pure plot, it's pure twists, it's pure gun to the head, and then the phone rings and something else has happened that, you know, that's a lot easier for a writer or an audience to see how they're being manipulated. And I say manipulated, but I mean in a good way. We pay into the magic show. We want to be fooled. Okay. With something like Northern Lights, because it's not that type of action show, like no one's getting hijacked on a plane and the plane's going to land in an hour and la la la. But there's still the same principle in a way of when little twists have to come, when information is revealed, how it's revealed, how it changes the perception without it being so incredible that you don't buy it. What I want from Northern Lights is anytime there's a little twist or a change or a shift, people go, oh, but they also go, that makes total sense. Of course, he's acting like that in previously. And now that we know that, how does it change your opinion of this? So yeah, I'm kind of, you're very much aware of the audience, and you get more aware the closer it is to going to film it, because you're constantly working on the scripts and you're constantly getting feedback from producers and story consultant and people questioning and challenging, and directors come in and then actors come in and everyone has questions and everyone's, you know, collaborating together. And then obviously you have the editing process as well, which might spring something up too. But I always think that should come sort of later on. I believe that it's like you hope that you have a natural ability to see where a story goes that keeps people interested, and that you're not overly putting structure on it. In a show like Northern Lights, it's like character reaction first and everything else last. And the most important thing, again, repeat myself a little bit, was that you hope everything that happens in it is real. It's not something, someone doesn't jump out of a closet and or it was all a dream, or, you know, my character is dead or something, like he's a ghost. Like, it's like everything has to be in place.
You mentioned kind of that feedback loop that exists in telly as well, and then the more financiers, the more producers that come on, there's a notes process that exists there. Scripts are rarely ready, in my experience, by the time you're even coming close to production. There's a lot of rewrites and stuff like that going on. Two questions. One was, how did you find that notes process? And two, which is a bigger question, the process of writing and acting. I'm sure that the writing job probably didn't end as soon as like day one of principal and you step on set. So that must have been a challenge as well.
Yeah. So the first part, it's so funny. I'm really bad and then really good at taking notes. Like, I've got better over the year. I'm terrible at taking criticism, like really bad. For about 10 minutes. And when I was younger, it was probably a day, you know? So when I get notes, I can't help it. I just have to be brutally honest. There's a part of me that is like raging. Like, you know, like for about 5 or 10 minutes. And I know that's just weird. It's just part of my personality. Like I'm super competitive. I'm a nightmare to play 7-a-side with and against. And I hate being wrong. I hate like I go mad at Christmas if I don't win the game, you know, or the quiz or whatever we're doing. It's like, but what I have improved is that I breathe, I take it in, and I realize that they're probably all correct, and they're there to help my script. So I have my little 10 minutes of private hissy fit in the corner and go, you know, they don't understand my genius. And then I realized that they know a lot more than me. And I read back over it and I go, this is great. I'm so grateful that I have good help here.
10 minutes is still a good turnaround time.
Yeah, it's not too bad. It's not too bad. I know I'm hopefully getting wiser with age. But do you know what? That's the thing. It's good to everyone, you come on a podcast or you have a chat or you do whatever, and everyone pretends to be a perfect person, and so sometimes I dread getting a phone call from story consultant. It takes me a couple of minutes to kind of go, okay, like, oh, this is good. We're having a chat now, because there's just an inherent fear of someone ringing you and going, this is awful, this is dreadful. You'll never be allowed right again. What are you doing? You're an imposter. Get out. You're charlatan. So anyway, I've improved a little bit on that. I don't air it to anybody. I don't give out to anybody. I just have a little private thing, and then I go, okay, let me see what they actually said. Oh, this is quite good. So that's the notes process, and yeah, like, to be honest, like, I just enjoyed so much of filming the show, and all those years of experience of being an actor in the theater, and day parts, and supporting roles, and camera time built up. It kind of actually, I was felt I was very ready, particularly to play this character, but to lead a show and to be on set most days and most of the scenes. So I felt like I couldn't be in a better position experience wise. Obviously, I wrote the character, so many elements of Lloyd that are close to me. So I just enjoyed the process. But there was times, like, there's funny pictures of me having done like a 12-hour day as an actor, and there's night shoots going on, and I'm at the kitchen table of the kind of location house having to write a 2-minute scene for the next day, because between actors and directors, you cut a couple of lines here. I can do this with a look. I can do this. Maybe we should cut that. It's too much. All of a sudden you're going, oh, our episode's running short. We need something else, or we can't have that location, or we can't have this. We need to rewrite it. Like a really good example. This is a little bit earlier on. It was like a week or two before we started shooting, maybe a week. And the big set piece of the middle of the show was supposed to be the All Ireland karaoke competition, and it was set in this big hotel, and people were in black tie, and it was supposed to be this big deal, and they went, we just haven't the budget to put 200 extras out there in black tie and gowns and everything else. And it ended up then being this kind of two clubs got together for a piss up and hired James Patrice and called it the Karaoke Clash in a bar in a small hotel. Like, it ended up being much funnier and much more real and less up its own hole. And, but at the time that was a disaster. I was like, that cancelled the production, so lots of little challenges came up, but there was always a part of me that was going, yeah, like, I've wanted to do this for so long that it was never, I'm not trying to be, oh, what a hero, but it was like, it was never an issue to have to, dicky up a few scenes or write an extra scene or make changes. Even the days I wasn't filming, I'd want to be on the set and be around it, and because I was like, I have always had the attitude of it might never happen again.
Wearing those two hats, how did you prep for playing Lloyd, or did you have to do much because you already knew him so intimately, I guess?
I didn't do a whole lot, really. I knew him so well. My only thing I had to do was make sure I wasn't trying to play my version of that character from 4 years previous.
Yeah.
But that was easier because, there was all these new characters to interact with, and not just new characters, new actors. And I think after the first scene or two, I just settled into it, and I was just like, just do what you do, and just prepared the scenes in terms of knowing them inside out. Even though I wrote them, you still have to learn them, and just sort of went with it, not trying to do any more than was required. I think that's experience. I think that's if I tried to change my particular process, whatever that is, because all of a sudden, because I was playing a lead role, I think I would have overdid it. Yeah, so it was handy that it was that character very close to me. I didn't have to do anything physically or with my voice or anything that required extra time. It was just about showing up and letting that personality come out, basically.
Well, listen, I think your performance and Elva, everyone across the show is phenomenal. And Lloyd is just painfully real. And I think the general depiction of Dublin is heartwarming. I was going to ask you, you mentioned about playing particular types of roles and how that impacts you before and maybe after a show. And there's such emotional lows in Northern Lights. I was wondering how you prepare yourself for that, or how you also protect yourself as an actor from the things that you have to carry when you are Lloyd.
Mm.
Do you have a process for that, or is it just something that, you know, will take as long as it takes to leave you?
Yeah, in a way, I think the special characters, they never really leave you, actually. And it's sometimes the ones like Lloyd is an obvious one because of the circumstances and things that have happened to him, and there's certain very emotional scenes. Like that, even though I have not suffered the same scenario as Lloyd has in my real life, that sort of connection to that sort of emotion was there, almost on tap. Having to hold it back a lot of times, for whatever reason. Like it's a funny one. Like like my dad is a trained psychotherapist. He doesn't practice anymore, but I've had a lot of conversations with him about it. I've used therapy in my life myself, but not so much as an actor. I think for me, it's more being aware of it, and that it's okay to let them, whatever those emotions are or those characters, let them go a little bit. I mean, I think they stay with you. How it started, how I realized this was that I was doing a play called Class, and it was a quite successful play, the Dublin Theatre Festival, and then it moved to the Peacock, and then it won a Fringe first at Edinburgh, and it went to the Bush Theatre in London, and a three-hander, but a parent-teacher meeting that kind of goes wrong. A very working class couple, more of a middle class teacher, and there's confusion about certain language about this couple who are breaking up, their child's potential learning difficulty, and I think people remember it as quite a funny play, and it was very funny, but it was also quite heartbreaking. My character, I play two characters. I play a guy called Brian, and I also play his 9-year-old son in the same play, which seems a bit gimmicky, but there's the girl who's playing my wife, woman who's playing my wife, Sarah Morris, played a brilliant actress. She's also playing a girl in the school who's in homework club, who's having learning difficulties, and the teacher, played by Will O'Connell, he always stays as Mr. McCafferty. And my character Brian he was so angry because he couldn't articulate how he felt, and he was losing everything around him, was going down the toilet. And but again, people remember as a great night out and a funny play. And it was my partner at the time was like, every time this play comes back, you're just like not there. And I was irritable and being short with people, which is not my normal way of being. And yeah, really, really affected me. And it was only afterwards a conversation about this came up, and I mentioned this to somebody, and they were saying, it was Irish Theatre Institute, they were saying there really should be, for certain shows, some consideration in budgets or in funding, that actors might need to go and talk to someone for a few weeks after these things. And that's not to be like, to certain shows, most of the shows, even if there's heavy stuff, like I've done all the big kind of Love, Hate, Kin and Red Rock, and I've been shot and killed in most of them. Those kind of playing a drug dealer are like, not they're just like you know, they're real heavy stuff in the real world, but for an actor, they're kind of fun, and you don't think about it 10 minutes after they call cut, you're done. But it's these weird little ones that are connected to your real life that can get you. So it's you know, the odd one that sometimes people might need to kind of talk it out. What's happened to me was, I think, just talking with people about this, is that I have an easier time saying, okay, you go somewhere into the back, in the back there. I've processed you a little bit better. I understand that I'm more connected to this than I thought. It's not just learning lines and saying them. It's that your body doesn't know the difference between the emotional real life and the emotional life on stage. It's the same act in a way. It's like they say, your body, before you go on stage, even as an experienced actor, like, I'm riddled with nerves and adrenaline, and I want to be sick, and what am I doing? I feel like I'm going to pass out. And I heard a thing, it was like, they say, you know, your body has the same shock as if it was in, you know, like kind of mid-speed car crash, you know. And it's like the body is producing the same, you know, chemicals, I guess, are different in, you know, whatever reactions. It doesn't necessarily know for that what Lloyd is going through, and me crying my eyes out all day and really feeling it, and that still has an impact on me. That my body doesn't need to know the circumstances. All it knows is that it's feeling it. And I think if you understand that, you can have a better sense of once it's over, you're not carrying it so much.
Totally. Look, it's like you talking about being on stage and living it. And if you're living it physiologically, it is happening in your body. It's not just a tap that you turn on and off.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's a great shout, though. I love that idea of having a budget line for certain shows that at least offer the opportunity for people to avail of talking to someone after the fact to process everything that's gone on, especially if you're in a role that is like you're living trauma and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it can be, as I said, it can be surprising ones. You know, I mean, you know, there's obvious ones if you're doing a show that's to do with violence or domestic abuse or sexual abuse, or you know, or things of a really kind of heavy nature that would affect, you know, the vast, overwhelming majority of actors in the population. That's clear. But as I said, sometimes it's the ones that you don't expect. In a way, sometimes as I said, the heavier ones, the seemingly more heavy ones, you might be more kind of prepared to not be so connected to it. It's the ones where it could be a relationship breaking up, or, you know, the loss of a friend, or look, to me and you, we could have different things that affect us, you know. So yeah, so it's one that actors should be aware of, that it's a great tool to have, to be able to tap into these things and to really go to these places. But it's important to know that just because, you know, the play ends or someone calls cut, you know, like if you're not aware of it, they'll follow you.
Yeah. Did you find it difficult in any capacity, or what was the process like, having written the show, previously played Lloyd, you're playing him again, and now you are working with 3 directors who probably at different points maybe have different interpretations, and they're hopefully trying to help you craft what they think Lloyd is as well. What was that process like?
Yeah, really interesting. Like 3 very different directors, and in terms of their 3 strong personalities, and 3 like lovely people and very talented people. I knew Tom Hall from before. We hadn't worked together, but we knew each other personally. And because he was sort of what you was classed as the lead director, I had a lot of conversations with him beforehand. Tom is great. He's very direct, very clear, very experienced, full of opinions. So I developed a very quick trust with him. Ruth Meehan was brilliant too. She directed 1 episode, and she was kind of like, just brought her own flair to it, and very good with actors, and very encouraging in terms of, you know, trying things and going for it. Anthony Schatteman, like kind of rising star director from Belgium. What I kind of learned from him was he was very very clear on how he wanted it to look and how shots should look and the aesthetics of a shot. And he had a lot of kind of heavy emotional stuff in his episodes, for me anyway. So he was just like, it's all there. He was trying to just make sure I wasn't pushing too hard, which is great. So I kind of, I have to be honest, I looked out in that they were, I don't think if you watch the series from start to finish, you would necessarily feel there was different directors, which I've worked on some shows where you could feel it. You go, oh, that was so-and-so's episode. Yeah, you can tell, So I was lucky in that sense that I got on with all of them, and I really enjoyed the different, like their thought process, their notes that they would give. And when you're an actor, like it's so nice to feel that like you're like a little baby again. It's like, please just guide me, just make sure I do this okay, make sure I look good doing it. And I don't mean physically, I just mean from an acting point of view. And yeah, and I think the most important thing was that they all, and same with all the crew, everyone felt like they really liked the material, connected to the material. Like everyone wanted to be there, wanted the best for it, were really pushing. But that's the biggest compliment I can give the process of working with different people, and that I don't think, if someone just said it was one director, I don't think anyone would bat an eyelid.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's across the whole series. It's like looks beautiful. The way the camera moves is always motivated in a very kind of meaningful way as well.
Yeah, and the other thing is that there's certain parts of the industry that that I don't know anything about. Like, and I just go, that's your job. It was Tom and Ruth's and Anthony's job, and Maxime, our DOP, incredible DOP from Belgium. Like I didn't care about. I was just acting in a scene and writing the dialogue for a scene. I mean, I don't know how to make it look dynamic because it's 10 pages of people chatting in a room in a flat. I mean, like, I'm not going to tell those people where to put the camera and what to do because I haven't a clue. So, I was relying on other people's skills and very happy to just be the actor and the writer in it, and let them figure out how to make it look beautiful and real and dynamic and interesting. And that's a very freeing, feeling too. People say you must have had a lot to do, and I go, yeah, but there was other people doing a lot as well, and and struggling to try and make my sometimes stagey scenes, feel like television. I had the easy job, is what I'm trying to say.
I was going to ask you about music. You mentioned maybe not getting your first or second or third choice song at different points, maybe. But I get a sense that music still has, not just in Northern Lights, big impact on your work. I think your show at the moment is a music-based show, Rare L Times. Where does that influence come from, and how important was the music in Northern Lights to you in making sure that you had the right songs?
Well, I always sort of write to music, and it tends to be a certain one or two certain songs might just be played over and over and over again. And I think it's like anything in what I love about songs or say poetry is that these are people who can say what I want to say in 6 hours of television. Some people have the capacity to say in 3 minutes or 2 lines, So yeah, I always had just a kind of, the feeling of a song is sort of what I want to do if I write a play or a show. It's like, there's you want the people to remember the great lines. You want people, but it's more, you want people to remember a feeling. Yeah, it's just a universal thing that we all connect to, and I think that's what I'm trying to do with anything I write. And I think that's why music is important. In Northern Lights, it's important because it's one of the masks that the main character wears. He's able to express himself through his love of karaoke, and as funny and quirky and silly as that is, in one sense, everyone always, even from the early stages, everyone loved the karaoke, all the producers, and because it's a real thing, but it's sort of, again, it's mad but real, odd but real. But what was important is that, like, we we can tell you so much about the story, and from pinching the great work of other people. So it makes my life easier. But like, even example was Denise his partner is brought to the karaoke club for the first time by their mutual friend who works with her, and she gets up to sing, and in the show she sings "In Dreams" by Roy Orbison. Now, initially that was what's the song? The world was on fire, no one could save me but you. That song. Title's gone out of my head, but we couldn't get the rights, or were just off the charts. It cost more than the show type thing, and so we got a list of songs that we could have, and it ended up being "In Dreams." But then it sort of worked. It sort of worked better, because the idea was then that you were saying two things at once. Like, here was his dream woman that he met that we're seeing in the past. So we're seeing it in almost like a dream-like fashion. Beautiful dreams. The word beautiful comes up so much. And then when he's performing it in the flat to Anya, who's this kind of stranger, they're having a kind of a weird dream-like weekend as well. These magic weekends that we sort of all had. So thematically to the story, it was stronger but less obvious. But I never would have thought of that song. It just was circumstance. And there were certain songs that we absolutely did get, that were written into the script from day one. So yeah, just about what the feel is. If it has some sort of intertextuality, great. Another great little story about the music was that my previous play that is connected to Northern Lights is called From Eden. So I said it would be so cool if we could get Hosier's song From Eden to be the title track for Northern Lights. It would just be this small little, not in joke, but just this connection for me that I'd know about, and Carl, wherever he is in the universe, would know about. And at the time we thought it was going to be too expensive, and but thankfully they got it, and Hosier heard about the material and gave us the track. But I'm like, there's a line, the opening lines of that is like, babe, there's something tragic about you, something so magic about you. And that is Anya, Lloyd, and Denise, in two lines. Them as people, them as characters, their scenario that they've been through, which is what the whole thing is saying, is that, we're all in our ordinariness, in our averageness of our everyday lives. There's tragedy and there's magic that happen to us and that are within us. And that's what it was about. It was about the extraordinary, ordinary people.
Beautiful, man. And I talked about those kind of, I guess, the seamless connection between past and present in the show as well. And I think there's a good few times as well where you use music to bring us in and out of different times, and it works seamlessly.
Yeah, our composer was amazing. Again, someone from Belgium who he's so connected to the show when he saw it. And I think it's like anything. The fact that I know that, and then I see what he came up with for the score and his choices, and just how it enhanced everything. You can tell he had a real affinity for it. So yeah, just again, very lucky, the creative talents of so many people that you need, and you know that you hope that will be simpatico. I think that's the word, with what you hoped you would see. Like, I mean, it surpassed my expectations watching it, for sure. And that was like, again, cliche, but I was like, if everybody hates this but myself and my mom and dad think it's good, that'll be all right for me, and I'm really proud of it. And it's like, it goes at its own pace, it tells its own story. I think it's real, and there's lots of things you sort of seen before, but then it has its own unique kind of flair as well, and it sort of does its own thing, which I think is great.
Look, I think it's absolutely something you should be proud of. It's a phenomenal show. I blubbered through at least 3 episodes. It's not often that telly has been able to make me feel what Northern Lights made me feel, and I just think it's an incredible piece of television. And you mentioned pace, beautifully paced, beautifully shot, beautifully performed. But, you know, it all starts with words on a page somewhere, and that all begins with you. So I'm very glad that Deadpan and Ailish came in and said, let's make it. And for anyone who may be listening, it's on the TG4 player, and well worth the watch if anyone hasn't seen it yet. The last thing I think on the show I was going to just put to you was at the end of episode 6, and you've already mentioned Carl, dedicated to Carl at the end of that. And I was just wondering if you're willing to maybe talk a little bit about the man himself. I crossed paths with Carl briefly in Fair City, but I know he has left a massive legacy and impact on a lot of writers and performers. And I was curious about his impact on you and maybe his role as friend and mentor.
Yeah, well, I first came across Carl as an actor. I went to see The Pride of Parnell Street with himself and Mary Murray, who are a phenomenal actress who I've worked with many times over the years as well. And just thought they were incredible, you know. Saw him in other shows over the years. Then once I started kind of doing more plays, introduced to him, I think in one of the pubs anyway, probably where was it at the time? I don't know which one it was, but one of them, it was the Plough at the time, possibly. Anyway, and then just kind of got to know him a little bit, and then he ended up moving into the same house as me. It was kind of mad house in Ormond Quay, 7 rooms, 4-story building, kind of a couple of doors down from where Lloyd's flat is in the show. And that was important to me, that you could actually see the bridge out the window. So the locations team did amazing. We actually tried to get the place that I used to live in, but too many residents, and it was just kind of tricky. And at the time he had started up Theatre Upstairs, so I was going to support that as an audience member, and he was constantly onto me as a kind of a housemate. You know, when are you writing a show for me? When are you writing a show? And we go back and forth and chat about that. Eventually, as I said, he gave me a date. He said, you're on November. This was the summer. So I ended up writing From Eden, asked him would he direct it. He said he'd love to. And then really came closer with him, got a really good insight into how his brain worked and just how much he understood about acting and also just the human condition, you know. Carl, in many ways as well, I think reminded me of my dad. So my dad is an alcoholic who hasn't drank for 27 or 28 years. And then he went back to become a psychotherapist and help many people in similar positions that he'd been in. So really learned a lot about himself and life and people and why people do what they do. And Carl had issues as well over the years. And I think what I liked about him was that he was quite a real person, and, you know, had flaws and had, you know, good qualities. And if you got on the wrong side of him, he probably wasn't, you know, your favorite person in the world, I guess. I never had one bad word with him ever. And I just thought he was a really interesting and kind of remarkable and, you know, deep down, really big-hearted and kind-hearted person, and a bit of a kind of artistic genius. You know, it's like where you go in life is funny. I mean, I remember himself and Aidan Kelly, who I've worked with as well, doing the original Howie the Rookie and being in New York and having all these agents kind of fawning over them and meetings and different things. And, you know, it's one part here or one part there, or maybe it's the way you look sometimes physically for these things, you know. Like, you know, these boys could have been doing roles that Colin Farrell or Cillian Murphy got. You know, talent was there, and just really encouraging of my work. Learned a lot doing From Eden and Northern Lights with him as a director. Just how he could make so much out of small moments, which I carried with me into the show. A perfect example is Anya gives Lloyd a gift, a frame of a passage from his favorite book towards the end of the play and of the television show. And Carl was stopping me. He's going, whoa. Like, you're handling this like it's nothing. This is like this in a different life. She's your soulmate, and she's handing you this piece of treasure that only someone who, on a deep spiritual level, loves you would even have the notion of thinking about remembering this to give to you. And so it changed my body and how I held this thing. But what it also did was it meant that every moment of my interaction as Lloyd with Anya, he instinctively knew that there was an angel in front of him. And whatever that means, this magic thing that was precious. And that helped motivate the reason why he was lost and going through his own shit, why he had to sort of hang on to this bit of magic, this bit of hope, and why he sort of meddles with the truth a little bit at times, and that all came from how you hold something, which is it's such a basic thing for an actor. How you use your hands, your hair, your facial hair, your body, your legs, how you stand, how you walk, everything is like that. I remember I did a play called Hue and Cry, and Carl had originated the role, Deirdre Kinahan play. So I remember chatting to him briefly about it, because I hadn't seen it, but I'd heard he'd been phenomenal in it. And he remember going, "Oh, look, I won't tell you how to play the role. Obviously, you'll do your own thing." He said, "One thing is, though, they have to remember he's so beaten down and with his addiction and everything else, is that think of him as a dog who's afraid in a corner, terrified to be touched." And like that was like one line. He had these one lines every now and again about every character that we talked about, and that again changed the whole performance. Maybe unlocked the door to making this performance of mine a lot deeper and a lot more meaningful. And it was like something that he said about the last 30 seconds of a play informed the first 30 seconds, which informs the whole thing. So he understood life, and I think that came from good experiences and bad experiences, and probably been a hellraiser at times, and very important in my life. I was going through a dark period in my life, and he gave me some amazing advice, which was probably difficult at the time to hear, but important. I loved him. I thought he was a great talent, and taken from us far too soon.
It was lovely to see that dedication at the end. You mentioned you're writing season 2. Is that what is next for you, or is there anything in between?
Like anything, I've kind of been given the go ahead. I've written a treatment for season 2, and been given the go ahead to write the first couple of episodes anyway. So I'm sort of towards the end of it's still the first draft, but it's kind of like the second or third little mini version of the first draft. Close to the end of episode 2. I'll write episode 3 hopefully in the coming weeks. And then we all sit down and see, where the financing is at, and we'll potentially get it greenlit to film later in the year. Fingers crossed. The show is coming out in lots of different countries, from March and in the summer and stuff. So lots of exciting things still to happen with season 1. Still a lot more people, around the place to see it. So it's still early days with that. And yeah, I'm kind of I'm testing the waters with some other stuff. Like I've a kind of a more of a singing and story show. I did one last year before Christmas that went really well. Do another one on Sunday at the Civic. That's more tunes. And then I'll be doing Tuesdays with Maury, a play in the Gaiety and a few different venues, Cork and Kilkenny and Dundalk. But 2 weeks in the Gaiety mid-April with Dan Butler, who was an actor that was played Bulldog and Frasier. So that's exciting. Just be back in the Gaiety and to do a play again. But the main focus, for the next few months is trying to write season 2 and hopefully get in a position where we get to go ahead to go and make it, because I think the ideas are really good. It's like anything. I thought it would be a limited series, and if the financing doesn't go or people decide they don't want to do it, I think Northern Lights on its own is a great standalone piece. But they always do say, keep some ideas in mind, and yeah, some really good stuff has come up. It's all plotted and planned out. And I think audiences would be, if they like the first one, would be interested to see what happens to these guys a few years on.
Yeah, I will watch. Last one. So in talking kind of about some of those notes that Carl was able to give you that unlock things, is there anything that now, or maybe to put it in a better way, what is the one thing now that you would tell your younger self about the industry or your career or your craft?
Honestly, I think it goes back to the point I touched on earlier, which is whatever you're doing now, that's the only thing. Actually, more precise, look, everyone has to pay bills, right? So there's gonna be jobs or ads or different things that you do that is in a way is meaningless to you. But as much as possible, the jobs that you're really passionate about are the ones that you'll remember. You know, like I've done shows in big venues, and I thought that was going to be the be all and end all, and it wasn't. It was working on my own plays in theatre upstairs. All right, Northern Lights has gone on to be a television show, great, but as amazing as that was, I can't say that it was any better a feeling than when I did the play in theatre upstairs. That was still the ultimate thing. So I think that's it. If you can, if people, if it's knowing that when you're doing something, no matter how big or small scale it is, that you're really passionate about and that you really believe in, they're the real moments to cherish. Don't worry about the big theatre calling you for the next gig. You know, just enjoy the ones that you care about, because they might not come around that often. I think that's it. Just to you know, not worry about what's next.
It's a great piece of advice.
I wish I had something more profound, but there's loads of little tips and lines and all that I've gotten over the years. I mean, and one other one that I actually think is important mentioning, because I always say to people, it's more for actors who work in the theatre, I guess, is that, but I guess it applies for watching. People worry about like how many people are going to show up to a show, or what were the ratings like. And I know that's important for money and stuff like that, for companies and producers and all that. But it was a piece of advice I got from an actor, and he got it from an older actor who ended up in Northern Lights as well. So he's a good skin. And he said, you have to always remember there will always be at least one person in your audience who needs that performance on that particular night. And I thought that was very powerful. It meant that I went from playing like 1,000-seater venue across the UK, and or the Abbey packed sold out for 2 months, and then you're in the studio somewhere and there's 10 people and there's a rake of empty seats, and that doesn't bother me now. I remember going down doing a one-man show in front of 7 people in Burr and Offaly, and it was one of the best nights I've ever had as an actor, because I was connected to those people, and I had it in my mind that one person needs this. They have something going on in their life, whether it's super heavy, whether it's relationship drama, whether it's work, whether it's stress, whether it's full-blown crisis, or whether it's just an hour and a half of not thinking about whatever it is on their mind. It's a powerful thing for me, because I think what we do for a living, anyone in the arts, no matter what the discipline, I think we're doing something important for people. It's not saving lives in the same way as a surgeon or a nurse, but it's saving lives in a different way.
I would agree wholeheartedly, and I think that's a great way to end.
We're saving lives out here, people.
Stephen, thanks very much.
Cheers, man. Appreciate it.
And that's a wrap on Stephen Jones. Thank you for listening to the Filmmaker's Playbook. If you're enjoying the show, please share it with a friend, or follow and rate us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. As always, if you have feedback, questions, or topics you'd like me to cover on the show, please put them in the comments section on our Instagram page at the Filmmaker's Playbook Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at Jason Branagan Director, and you can find Stephen on Instagram at Jonesy Dublin. Links and social media handles are in the show notes. Join me next week when I talk to actor Elva Trill. Until next time.